You're listening to The Manning Report with your host, James David Manning. The news behind the headlines.
I want to talk with you today about the last president that we've had, that William Jefferson Bill Clinton, governor of Arkansas, was the last president that America had, and he was impeached. Now, there's a lot of talk about impeachment here in America today, and it's getting more frenzied as it goes along. Let me ask you a question. Do you believe that Barack Hussein Obama was ineligible to be president? Do you believe that there was something shady and fishy? Do you believe that the powers that be, whether it be, the Bilderbergs or the Illuminatis or some other major group, or Wall Street in particular, put Obama in power? Do you believe they rigged elections, that they suppressed votes in some areas, that they, did things that were not of the type of election process that normally would put a person on? Do you believe that actually Obama pushed out Hillary in order that they might make him president? But he really wasn't eligible. He was born in Kenya. He has had homosexual issues, whether you believe that or not about him. He was at least accused of that. He was accused of using cocaine and a drug user. He was accused of not having attended Columbia University, but they gave him a certificate or a degree anyway. Do you believe any of those things about Obama being an illegal president? Do you? You believe it? Well, if you believe it, and I'm sure that many of you do, why is it that you find it so difficult to believe that Tribulation Trump is an illegal president? I mean, you can believe that Obama was Kenya born, that he never attended Columbia University. And these things don't have to be true, but do you believe them? But yet you don't believe that Russia put Trump in power. You believe it about Obama. You believe that Obama was put in power by Wall Street, about the Illuminatis or the Bilderbergs or some other. Why is it that you think that Trump is cleaner than Obama? Why? Why do you think that the office of presidency is clean by who you imagine to be clean? You follow what I'm saying? And I want you to think for just a second. You don't have to agree with me. But I'm trying to bring you somewhere. I'm trying to help you to get someplace and probably protect your life and protect your well-being, your interests, your financial interests as well. But I want you to think for just a moment. Why is it that you believe that somehow or another the Iranian deal that Obama put together was wrong with John Kerry? Yet what Trump is doing with Kim Jong-un and with Vladimir Putin and with Xi Jinping is okay. You follow what I'm saying? And there are a couple of things here. Now, you don't have to, believe anything I'm saying, but I want you to think, and believe that if you can just consider this for a moment, it's going to be very helpful to you. Why do you wholeheartedly stomp down, willing to put your life on the line to believe that Obama was an illegal president, but you believe Trump is as clean as the driven snow? Why? What's the difference? Is it because Obama's alleged to be black and Trump's alleged to be white? Is it racial? And you need to think about, or is it just a fallacy of the human condition for many people to see people who are not like them to be always wrong and people more like them to be right? But before we get to you fully answering that question, I want to say to you that America has not had a president, not a legal one, since William Jefferson Clinton, and he was impeached. In his last term, the last 2 years of Clinton's term, he was impeached by the House with Newt Gingrich at the head of the congressional leadership at that time. The Senate voted not to completely find him guilty and put him out of office, so he escaped that bullet, but he was impeached. And his vice president, Al Gore, ran against a Texan by the name of George Herbert Walker Bush, who was the son of George Bush, the senior. And that particular election went to the courts because there was a matter of Florida's tally in terms of votes was so close that they could not discover who actually won the state of Florida. So the matter went to the Florida Supreme Court. They were unable to fully negotiate it. It finally ended up in the U.S. Supreme Court, where the U.S. Supreme Court gave the decision of the election of the Florida 24 votes, electoral college votes, gave those votes to George Bush, President Bush, as we now refer to him as, and Al Gore just faded into the woodwork. We've never heard from him again. But because the courts gave the election to George Bush, we can never know that it was really the will of the people. We can never know that that was exactly what the will of the people, that was what the state of Florida did, and perhaps there should have been another presidential election. And then George Bush goes on immediately after his presidency, and we have something known as 9/11, where planes fly into the World Trade Center, buildings at 110 stories high. No one ever conceived of anything like that. Two planes fly, one to the North Tower, one into the South Tower. And those buildings fall as flat as pancakes during the first year of George Bush's presidential administration. We start hearing the words like Al-Qaeda, something most Americans had never heard before, a name of Osama bin Laden, something that people had never heard before either. And off to the races we go, and America unites and comes together as one party, and George Bush stands there and says, the people that knocked down these buildings, they're going to hear from us pretty soon. And we start our event of the first phase of the war of retaliation in Afghanistan. But what I want to ask you, do you believe potentially that something about 9/11 is a bit fishy? That it just doesn't add up. It doesn't make sense. Something about 9/11 that in fact, the way the buildings fell, and nobody's ever explained to us why building number 7, that was not hit with an aircraft, also collapsed the same way building North Tower and the South Tower. And the fact that those buildings collapsed as a steel and concrete structure, and they collapsed as flat as a pancake, looked more like an implosion than it did actually an attack. And, the 19 alleged hijackers were trained in Saudi Arabia, went to school in Germany, and learned how to fly planes down in Florida. It just seems that something about that still ain't right. There was a lot of controversy about who did it. Was it an American's attempt to grab Middle East oil by blaming the Muslims for what took place, and on and on and on the discussion went. But something about 9/11 you still feel perhaps was not right. Is that the issue? So now you're able to believe that Obama was not legit. You're able to believe that 9/11 perhaps was not legit, but you cannot believe that Trump is also not legit. You don't want to believe that. You believe that God sent him. You believe that after Gore and Bush and the Supreme Court, 9/11, Obama and Kenya, Obama the birth certificate, Obama the Tea Party, all that was bad news. But when it comes to Trump, everything is everything, right? Now, you would probably need to really just sit down for just a moment and think about the logic of that, because, and what is it that is prompting you to believe in Trump when you don't believe in 9/11? You don't believe in Obama? What makes Trump different? But before we get there, we need to also talk a little bit about George Bush, because not only did he go into Afghanistan to fight the Mujahideen, who later became the Taliban, but he then decides he's going into Iraq because Saddam Hussein was over there waving that shotgun and waving that big old sword, talking that talk, and George Bush said they're going to take him down. And Colin Powell claimed that the CIA gave him a report that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction, chemical warfare and some other weapons, perhaps even a nuke. So George Bush, right, goes into, it with shock and awe, goes into Iraq and goes in there stating that Iraq and Saddam Hussein had something to do with 9/11. We've now discovered that that's not true. Nothing could be further from the truth. But as a result of George Bush going into Iraq, going after Saddam Hussein, more than 260,000 Iraqi civilians were killed. We're not talking about soldiers. We're talking about Iraqi citizens, men, women, and children, during the shock and awe. And the 19 years of war, or the 15 years of war, over 200,000 Iraqis were killed. Now, I got to tell you, for full disclosure, Saddam Hussein was killing a whole lot of people as well, but that was Saddam Hussein. But for the American soldiers to go in and kill civilians like that, you have to wonder whether or not why did George Bush do that? But not just that, at least nearly 5,000 American troops lost their lives in this process and campaign as well. And we had Confederates, or we had Allied forces that helped us, Britain and Australia and a number of other nations. They lost 3,400 soldiers as well, and over 12,000 Iraqi military police were killed in this combat. That George Bush, with Colin Powell and false information about the 9/11 event, kills nearly 300,000 people over an issue that we now believe to be a bogus issue, that Saddam Hussein had no weapons of mass destruction because none were found. My question, however, to you is this, is that George Bush was not a legitimate president. Barack Hussein Obama was not a legitimate president either. But why is it that you believe that Tribulation Trump is? Now, I have been consistent in these illegitimate presidents. We have not had a legitimate president since William Jefferson Clinton, or Bill Clinton, and he was impeached. But of the three presidents, they got progressively worse, from George Bush to Barack Obama, and now Tribulation Trump. But the thing I think I want to leave you with, and others, maybe you don't believe anything, maybe you believe Obama was legit, but you don't believe that Tribulation Trump is legit. Because there is that side of the coin. You got literally millions of people who believe that God sent Obama, that he was a God sent, that he was not put in power by the Bilderbergs, or he was not put in power by Wall Street money, that he was not put in power in a legal way, and that his birth certificate and all of his records and all the things about him that would disqualify him was covered up by the media, about the fake news, who liked Obama, so they protected him. They wouldn't report anything about him, whether it was Larry Sinclair, who wrote books and declared that he and Obama had a steamy love affair in the backseat of a limo and then at the Holiday Inn, that all of this was fake and false news, and the major news outlets would not report anything negative about Obama, and supported his idea, or his birth certificate that was put forward in April in the year 2010 or 13, I think it was. And it was just as phony as anything you've ever seen, because the typesets were different, the name of the hospital was different, but there was never any major investigation by the Attorney General. There was never any major investigation into Obama's alleged attendance at Columbia University, or with the fact that he worked with Mujahideen and turned them into the Taliban in Afghanistan. All of this was covered up by the fake news. All this was covered up by the press. New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Washington Post didn't want to report on none of this, didn't want to investigate it. There's not been one investigative story on Obama's birth certificate because they liked him. But when it comes to Trump, however, they're all willing to believe that Trump is a scoundrel, and they're right about that. Trump is illegal. They're right about that. That Trump was put in power by Russia, and they're right about that. But all of these men, George Bush, Barack Obama, and Tribulation Trump, are all illegit. We have not had a president, and we'll never have another one. You hear me, right? No, we've not had a legal president since William Jefferson Clinton, and we will never have another legal president. The only way we can ever have a legal president, first of all, time will not allow, the tribulation will not permit. The biblical prophecy spoken by Jesus about the utter destruction of his creation, with earthquakes and wars and rumors of wars and famines and pestilences spoken by Jesus as a plague upon the earth to kill off most of humanity the way God did in the days of Noah and the flood, will preempt any further legitimate presidencies on planet Earth. But even were that not the case, you cannot have a legitimate president when Obama was illegitimate. And I spoke this for 10 years, that until Obama's been identified as an illegitimate president, the next person, even if they win the office legitimately, could not have been the legitimate president. You know, the person that perhaps should have been a legitimate president, legitimate constitutionally, but not necessarily in the eyes of God. The person who should have been, and I want you to think about this for just a second, think deep and long about those of you who think deep and long on this, those of you who've known me for some time. The person who really should have been the next legitimate president would have been Hillary Clinton, and she lost out twice to Obama. Her husband was the last legitimate president. George Bush was not, and that was a matter of the courts, which could be discussed either way. But she lost out to Obama, an ineligible person, and then she lost out to Tribulation Trump, which nobody could have ever guessed or believed or thought or dreamed that it would take place. My question is this, is that, and I want to look at both camps. You believe wholeheartedly that Obama was illegit. You believe that he was ineligible. You believe that. You believe that he was a phony and a fraud. You believed it. Yet, Tribulation Trump, who is obviously outright identifiable, put in power by Russia, but that you don't believe, that you just one who lies, he's a public degenerate, he's uncouth, he's unfit, he's untrustworthy, and yet you believe him, but you don't believe Obama. There may be something wrong with you. Maybe you're a racist. Maybe you're a racist. Maybe you're racist, and by that, you're willing to excuse, or you believe that just because a person is white, they are right. That white people can't do wrong, and that white people don't do wrong. That only black people do wrong. And maybe that's what racism means. And by the way, you know, the racism has a two-edged sword, because all the black people, all white people, liberals that believe that Obama's legit and believe that Trump is not, maybe they believe so because they too are racist. But the issue here is that the truth about both of these men is as glaring, as open as any book you ever want to read. You can pick up at the local library. Both of their lives are lives that are as fake and ineligible to be president as anything ever. You know, the mantra with Obama was that he's ineligible, but the mantra with Tribulation Trump is that he's unfit. So you got the unfit president and the ineligible president. And yet on both sides of the aisle, or the race spectrum, people believe what they believe because of race. You know, the Obama issue has not been fully litigated, but I don't want to dwell on that. What I do want to dwell on are the people who believe that Obama was illegit, but have no problems believing that Trump is legit. I mean, you really ought to look deep inside of your heart. You really should. I mean, you really should. I mean, you're willing to go to bat to take down Obama, but you're willing to walk through hell with gasoline draws to support Tribulation Trump. Why? Is it just you're just a plain, flat out racist? Or is there something else that's even worse than being a racist? That you're afraid that your race is going into extinction? Or that you feel impotent towards Mexicans or brown or black skinned people? You feel impotent. You know that Trump is about as unfit to be president as Uncle Amos Jackass. You know he has no reason, there's no reason why he should be sitting in that presidential office. You know that. But because you have a deep-seated fear that even you psychologically has not been able to analyze, you're willing to believe and trust in somebody. And, there's a problem here with your reasoning ability, which further connotes your demise, because cerebrally and intellectually and visually and empirically that Trump is a fraud. You know it. You know he's a fraud. But you're willing to act like that doesn't exist because there's another issue more important than him being a fraud, and that is the existence of white people and white race in general. And maybe you're not even aware of the two of those things are actually can be, if they're coexisting inside of your head, if the fact that Trump is a fraud living inside of your head, but there's also a fear of the extinction of white people living inside of your head, then you are psychologically deranged. That means that millions of America are psychotic. The same thing could be said about Obama's group. I'm not making an uber distinction. We have moved beyond Obama right now, and we're at a point. And I'm just simply you believe 9/11 was a fraud, was fake? You believe that the government did something wrong. You don't trust the government. Something happened in 9/11 that the government was involved in. You believe that. You believe that. You believe that the government, you believe that people, rich people, powerful people were involved, that Obama was not really eligible. He was really not a legitimate president. You believe that. You believe that. You believe that. You believe that. But when it comes to Tribulation Trump, he's as pure as the driven snow. He's as right as rain that God sent him. You're a fool. You are a fool. And there's nothing more to be said, except perhaps you've never had anything brought to you as clearly in a big picture and put on the cinematograph screen the way I've just put it on you. You see? So next time people watch you supporting Trump, but yet you condemned Obama, you're going to have to, and you condemn 9/11, you have to realize people are not as bold as I am. There are very few men stand the way I do and will stand and call you a fool and a phony and a racist to your face. But you are. You are a fool. If you support Trump and didn't support Obama, you're a fool, you're a phony, and a racist. I'm James David Manning. I'm the Lord's servant. And hallelujah. And boom, shakalaka goes right there.